So in this video we will focus on lists. So before that we are supposed to know the meaning of sequence. So what do you mean by sequence? So sequence is an object that contains multiple items of data. So the items are stored in a sequence one after the another, such as sequence of events or items. So now these are all the sequence in Python. String we have already covered. Now in this video we will be talking about list. So Python also supports sequence which can be considered as containers, and in those containers certain items are stored. So a sequence may have repeated items in the list. The number of elements is called the length of the sequence. So what do you mean by list? A list is a collection of values or an ordered sequence of values or items. So the items in a list can be of any type, such as string, integer, float, objects, or even a list. So which means list can contain another list. So elements of a list are enclosed in square brackets, so separated by commas. Values in the list can be modified, that is mutable. So as we have already discussed that strings are immutable, that is the values, the old values cannot be replaced by new values directly. So but in list, the elements of the list are mutable. This is the main property of list. And the values that make up a list are called its elements. Elements in a list need not be of same type. It can be of any types. So in other words, we can also say that lists are heterogeneous in nature. So this is how you will create lists in Python. So this numbers is nothing but it's the name of the list, and the elements of a list are enclosed in square brackets which is separated by commas. So as we have already discussed that the items in a list can be of any type. So I am combining both integers and float over here. So we can also create empty list in Python. So list1 is nothing but it's the name of the list. So this is termed as initialization of the list with a blank or no values. So we can say this as an empty list. For all the types of lists in Python. So this L1 is nothing but it is an integer list. It all the elements are integers in this particular list, and list L2 is a list with elements of different data types. We have string, float, and integer over here, and list L3 is a list of characters, and list L4, as we have already discussed, that it is an empty list because there is no element in this particular list. And list L5, that is L5 is nothing but this is a list of strings, and as we have already discussed that list can contain another list as an element. So here we are containing this list 849 as an element of the bigger list. So now if you want to print all the elements, you can use this print function. So L1, L2, L3, L4. So these are all the names of the list. So now try to run. Yeah, all the lists. So this is a list 1, and this is a list 2, list 3, list 4, and it goes on like this. We can also create list from an existing sequence or a string. So this can be done with the help of a inbuilt keyword called as list. So the list method in Python takes sequence types and converts a given string or a tuple into a list. So now for example, list1 equal to, now I am using a predefined function called list, and now inside the brackets I am giving the string or a sequence. So now if I try to print list1, yeah, all the elements of the particular sequence is getting printed. So in this example, we are using this list method to create a list from an existing sequence. So now list method is also used for creating empty list. So now look at this example. Now this is another way of creating an empty list using list method. So instead of giving this sequence directly inside this list method, we can also store this particular sequence in another variable and we can call that variable. So now let me show you an example. So for example, a equal to Python, and now I'm creating a list. So inside this list method, now I'm going to call that Now I'm going to call that sequence using this variable. So now if I try to print list1, all the elements of Python got separated, and this can also be done in another way. So now I'm getting the input from the user, and I'm passing that variable inside this list method. So now if I try to print list1, it will ask us to enter the name. So now I'm typing it as Python. Here also I'm getting the same output. So these are all the two ways of using list method. So we are clear about creating a list from an existing sequence. Now we will learn how to create a list from an existing list. So for this purpose, slicing operation is done. So now I'm creating a list. Now I'm creating another list. So as we have already discussed about the slicing operation, if you want, you can also check my previous video for more information. So now in list 2, the elements which is present in the index 1 and 2 will be stored, and if I try to print list 2, then I am getting this as my output. So suppose if you want to create a copy of your old list, you can simply do this by slicing operation. So now if you try to print list 2, then all the elements of your previous list, that is list 1, will be printed. So accessing the list element is same as accessing the characters in a string. So this can be done with the help of square brackets, and inside square brackets we are supposed to give the index value. So now let me show this with an example. Here is my list. If suppose I want to print 2, then I can use print list of, the index position of 2 is 1. So now, now 2 is getting printed. You can also negative indices for this purpose. And let me copy this and paste here. If I try to print the elements in the index position -4, 7 is getting printed, because from the left 10 is at position -1 and 9 is at position -2, 8 is at position -3 and 7 is at position -4. So we are getting 7 as our output. The list index can be a positive or negative integer value or an expression which evaluates to an integer value. So here look at this example. In the square brackets I am giving an expression. So 4 minus 3 will result, evaluates to an integer value which is 1. So the element at the first index is 2. So 2 is getting printed here. So using square bracket we can able to access all the elements of different types of list. So here is an example to access the elements from a character list. So now we are going to traverse a list. So traversing a list means accessing each element of a list. So now this can be done by using either in operator or by using range function. So now let me show this with an example. So I am creating a list 1. So for I in list 1, print I. Yeah, all the elements of the list is getting printed. So here in operator using for loop iterates each element of a list in sequence. So each element is accessed and displayed on the Python shell upon execution. So each element is displayed on a new line till all the elements are traversed and displayed. So this can also be done with the help of range function. So this is how we will use range function. So now in the first statement I am creating list 2 which contains all the elements, and in the second statement I am using this predefined function len which will return the length of the list and store that value in variable a. So here the value of a will be 5 because there are 5 elements in this list, so the length of the list will be 5. So for I in range a, which means range 5, so the I value iterates from 0 to 5 minus 1, which is 4. So now I am printing list 2 of index 0. So index 0 is 1 here, and in the second iteration I value will be 1. So the index 1 will be 2, and all the elements will be getting printed. So now we are going to talk about one important property, that is lists are mutable, which means they can be modified. So each element of the list can be changed. So this is a unique property of list which is not encouraged by strings, because we cannot change an individual element of a string. So now look at this example. Now I am creating one list. So now I am changing the element at the index position 1 to 5. So now the element at the index position 1, which is nothing but 2, this will be replaced by 5. So the output is this one. So here 2 got replaced by 5. So we can also compare two lists. So now look at this example. Now I am trying to compare list 1 with list 2. I am going to check whether list 1 is greater than list 2 or not. So now let us see how this comparison is done. So the first element of the list 1 will be compared with the first element of list 2. If it is equal, then the comparison moves on to the next element. The second element of the list 1 will be compared with the second element of list 2. If it is equal, then it moves on like that. So now look at this example. 1 is obviously lesser than 4, so our condition fails, so our output is false. So while comparing the first elements of list 1 and list 2, if it results false, then it will not compare the rest of the elements and it will directly print false. If it is equal, then it will move on to the next element and it will start comparing. So it will goes on like that. Talk about some important operations on list. So our first operation is concatenation operation. So concatenation is a process in which multiple sequence or lists can be combined together with the help of certain operators. Like here we are using this plus operator for concatenating purpose. So now look at this example. I am creating two lists and I am adding these two lists and storing it in a variable called list 3. Now if I try to print list 3, my output is like this. So please note that this plus operator is simply performing a concatenation with the list, but it's not adding the individual elements of the list. So please keep this in mind. It's a very important point to be noted. Now look at the second example. This concatenation operation can also be done like this. I am not assigning a separate variable for my second list. So instead of that, I am directly concatenating list 1 with this list. So I am getting the output like this. So now look at this example. In the above example, the statement list 2 equal to list 1 plus 40 shall generate an error since concatenation operation can be performed between two strings. So when we try to add a numeric value 40 to this list, Python will generate a type error. So if you want to add 40 to list 1, then you can give this 40 inside square brackets. So which means now 40 is a list and list 1 is another list. So now you can directly add both the list and you will get the required output. Other operator is replication or repetition operator. So if we use star, list 1 equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if I try to print list 1 star 2, now this replicates the list for specified number of times. So list 1 is getting printed for 2 times. So here list multiplication by another list will generate an error. So for example 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is another list. So now if I try to print list 1 into list 2, it will generate an error. Now we are going to use membership operator on list. So list 1 equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now print 1 in list 1. So it's returning true because element 1 is present in list 1. So if I try to print 8 in list 1, then it will return false because 8 is not in list 1. The same way not in operator is also used. So 1 not in list 1. So it will return false because 1 is there in list 1. So in this way, these membership operators are used in list. We are going to talk about some inbuilt functions in list. So our first function is append function. So append method adds a single item to the end of the list. It does not create a new list, rather it modifies the original list. So here is the syntax. So now list 1 equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. If suppose I want to add number 5 at the end, so I can do this by list 1 dot append. Inside the brackets, just enter the number which you want to add. Print list 1. 5 is getting added at the end. So this is the use of append function. Third is extend method. So extend method adds one list at the end of another list. In other words, all the items of a list are added at the end of an already created list. So now let me take an example. Our list 1 is this one and list 2 equal to 5, 6. Now if I am going to extend list 1. So I am taking list 1 dot extend inside list 2. So list 1 got extended. Now look at this third statement here. This list 1 is the primary list which will be extended, and this list 2 is will be the one added to list 1. So be careful while giving these variables. So our next function is insert function. The insert function can be used to insert an element or object at a specified index. So this function takes two arguments, the index where an item or object is to be inserted and the item or element itself. So this is the example for index function. List1 equal to 1, 2, 4. Now in the index position 2, I am going to insert an element. So list1 dot insert. So in the index position 2, I am going to insert Python. Yeah, if I try to print list1, yeah, in the index position 2, the Python got replaced. So suppose if you want to know the index of a particular element, you can do this by using index function. So index function in Python returns the index of the first matched item from the list. So now if I try to print list1 dot index of element 4, yeah, so index of element 4 is 3. And if you want to reverse all the elements of a list, then you can do this with the help of reverse function. So I am going to reverse all the elements. So list1 dot reverse, list1 dot reverse, list1 dot reverse. So now I am going to print list1. So yeah, all the elements of list1 is reversed. So now if you want to know the length of the list, then you can use len function. So print, now I am going to print len of this list1. Yeah, this is returning 4 because the length of list1 is 4, and there is a inbuilt function called sort. So this function sorts the items of the list by default in ascending order. So now I am going to sort this. So let me take another list where the elements got this is a list. So now I am going to sort this list, list2 dot sort. So now if I try to print list2, so yeah, all the elements got sorted. So if you want to sort this element in descending order, then you can do this by giving inside this sort, you are supposed to give reverse equal to true. So this helps us to print all the elements in descending order. Yeah, the elements got printed in descending order. So another important function is clear function. So this clear method removes all items from the list. So this method does not take any parameters. The clear method only empties the given list. It does not return any value. So for example, list1 equal to, so now if I try to clear the elements of list1 dot clear. So if I try to print list1, yeah, I am getting an empty list because all the elements from that particular list got cleared.